All right, so let's dive into something I know a lot of you are curious about. Studying in Singapore. It's a dream for so many people, right? I mean, you've got these world-class universities, amazing culture, tons of different people. And after you graduate, think of the career opportunities. But there's one thing that seems to always trip people up.
Yeah. What's that?
The IELTS. Everyone wants to know, do I absolutely need it to study in Singapore? And to be honest, that's exactly why we're here today.
Okay, yeah. Singapore, they have really high standards when it comes to academics. So I get why a lot of people just assume that the IELTS is a must-have,
Yeah.
like no matter what. But
Yeah, it does seem like that.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
But we dug into all that material you sent us, and honestly, it turns out it's not quite that simple. It really depends, like on your situation, which university you're thinking about, even the specific program you're applying to.
Okay, so it's not just a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. Man, now I'm even more curious. What did we find out about the universities that do require the IELTS?
All right, well, if you're thinking about those big-name universities, right, like the National University of Singapore or
Sure.
NUS or Nanyang Technological University, NTU.
Oh, yeah, those are the big ones.
Yeah, exactly. Or Singapore Management University, SMU. So those top ones, they're usually going to want to see that IELTS score, even if you grew up speaking English.
Yeah, makes sense. They want to make sure everyone's on the same page with their language skills. But what kind of scores are we even talking about here? Like, what are they looking for?
Okay, so for a university like NUS, they usually want at least a 6.5 overall on the IELTS. But
All right.
But here's where it gets interesting. There are some universities, good ones too, that are a bit more flexible about it.
Hold on. Are you saying there's a chance I could actually study in Singapore without even taking the IELTS?
You absolutely could. I know it's crazy, right? So you've got places like James Cook University, Kaplan Higher Education Academy, PSB Academy, and Sim Global Education. They're all pretty open to different ways of proving your English skills are good enough. It's all about finding those kind of hidden gems and figuring out what they're looking for specifically.
So what is it these universities are looking at to decide if someone can skip the IELTS?
One of the biggest things is your previous education. Like if you studied in English for a good chunk of your schooling, say 3 or 4 years, some universities might just waive that IELTS requirement.
Really? Just like that?
Yeah, and even more so if your whole degree was taught in English.
Wow. That could be huge for someone who maybe isn't the best test taker, you know, or if they're on a tight schedule. So it really pays to like look into each university and what they require. What about those placement tests you mentioned before? What are those all about?
Oh, yeah. Right. Some universities, they have their own English placement tests. It's like, a tryout to see what your level is. And if you do well, you might not need that IELTS. They just want to see if you'll be able to handle the work.
Interesting. So it's like their own way of making sure you're ready. Okay, but let's say you're someone who just does not do well with those big standardized tests, like the IELTS. What other options are out there?
That's a great question. And luckily, there are a few. Some universities are totally fine with accepting scores from other English tests. The TOEFL, PDE, even the Duolingo English tests these days. It's like having different keys, but they can all unlock the same door.
Oh, so it's not just about the IELTS. There are other ways to get there. You mentioned a medium of instruction certificate before. What is that exactly?
Oh, yeah. It's basically just a document from your previous school. It basically says, yep, they studied in English. It's like your school vouching for you. And it can really help some students avoid the IELTS altogether.
Okay, so it's like having your school back you up. And this is probably where LetzStudy comes in, right? I feel like they're pros at helping students figure this whole thing out.
You're right. LetzStudy, they're really good at this. They help students find universities that work for them, based on their qualifications.
Yeah.
And sometimes they even help them completely bypass the IELTS. We found some really cool success stories in their material.
Oh, I love a good success story. Tell me more.
Okay, so there's this woman, Priya Sharma. She really wanted to get a BB in Singapore, but her IELTS score wasn't that great and she was super stressed. But LetzStudy, they helped her find universities that cared more about her 12th grade English marks, which were really strong. And guess what? She got in without the IELTS.
No way. That's amazing. It shows that some universities are looking beyond just that one score. What about the other stories?
All right, so there's also this guy, Arjun Nair. He wanted to get his master's in computer science. LetzStudy helped him use the fact that his Indian university was all English. He didn't even need to take the IELTS.
Wow. That's thinking outside the box. And what about the last story?
Okay, the last one is about a woman named Sinha Rao. She always wanted to study hospitality management in Singapore, but the IELTS was giving her major anxiety. LetzStudy found her a college that uses individual interviews to test your English. Perfect fit.
It's like they're matchmakers for students in universities. But even with all these different ways to get around the IELTS, I'm still wondering, is it ever a good idea to just take it anyway, even if the university doesn't require it?
That's a really good point. It might seem weird, but a good IELTS score could make your application look even better.
So like an extra boost, even if it's not a requirement, especially if it's a really tough program to get into.
Yeah, exactly. It shows that you're serious about studying in English. Plus, a good score could even help you get scholarships or visas later on. It's a long-term investment, really.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. So even though there are ways to study in Singapore without the IELTS, a good score can definitely give you a leg up. But I guess the most important thing is to just do your research.
Absolutely. And always check the university's website, like right before you apply, because things can change.
And don't be afraid to reach out to the admissions office directly. They're there to help, and sometimes a quick call can clear things up.
Right, exactly. Sometimes it's good to talk to a real person.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here. We talked about which universities want the IELTS and what your other options are if you don't want to take it. We even heard some inspiring stories. But what about the possible downsides of not taking the IELTS? Are there any catches we should know about?
That's a really good question. Even if a university says the IELTS is optional, there are a few things to remember. Like, they still might prioritize students who do have a score,
Hmm.
especially if there aren't that many spots in a program.
Ah, so it's like a secret weapon. You might not need it, but it could be the thing that puts you over the top.
Exactly. And another thing to remember is, even if the university doesn't need the IELTS, you might still need it for your visa application. Sometimes Singapore's immigration policies have their own requirements.
Oh, I see. So it's super important to double check both the university and the visa requirements. You don't want any surprises later on.
You got it. It's all about being thorough and prepared. And here's another interesting thing. Sometimes those IELTS waiver policies depend on what country you're from.
Wait, seriously. So where I come from could actually affect whether I need the IELTS or not? I'm guessing that has to do with your education system, like back home?
Yep, you got it. So students from countries like India, Malaysia, the Philippines, they might have an easier time getting an exemption. Their education systems already use a lot of English.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. It's like they've already got a head start, so there are a lot of factors at play here.
For sure. That's why it's so important to do your research and get advice from someone who knows what they're talking about. There's not one right answer for everyone when it comes to the IELTS and studying in Singapore. But for students who really want to study there without the IELTS, there are options.
Okay, so let's say I'm one of those students. What's the first step?
Well, the first thing is to find universities that are known to be flexible about their English requirements. We mentioned a few, like James Cook University, Kaplan, PSB Academy, Sim Global Education. They usually have guidelines on their websites about what else they'll accept.
So it's kind of like a treasure hunt, finding those universities that are open to different paths.
Totally. Once you've found a few that might work, then you really need to dig into what they require specifically. Do they accept TOEFL scores, PTE, Duolingo? Will they take a medium of instruction certificate? Do they give their own placement tests? Those answers will tell you what to do next.
Sounds like a lot of research, but it'll be worth it to find the right fit.
It will. And remember, LetzStudy can be really helpful with this. They know the Singaporean education system inside and out, and they can help you figure it all out. They might even connect you with other students who've done it before, people who studied in Singapore without the IELTS.
Yeah, that's always helpful to hear from someone who's actually been there. It's like having a mentor. Okay, so let's say I found a university that seems like it'll work and I've got everything else I need, to prove my English is good. What else can I do to make my application look amazing, even without that IELTS score?
Great question. The first thing is to really highlight your English skills on your resume and in your essays. Don't be shy about all your experiences. Like, have you been in English debates? Did you volunteer with any international organizations? Have you ever written for an English publication? Put it all in there.
So show them you can actually use English, not just get a good test score.
Right. And if you have any letters of recommendation from teachers or professors who can talk about how good your English is, definitely include those too. Having a respected academic back you up can make a big difference.
Yeah, like they're vouching for you.
Exactly. And if the university offers its own placement tests, make sure you really prepare for them. It's your chance to show off your skills to the people who make the decisions.
Yeah, like your audition.
Exactly. And don't underestimate that statement of purpose. That's your chance to tell your story, why you want to study in Singapore, and how committed you are to doing well in an English-speaking environment.
It's your opening scene.
Totally. Remember, even if you're not taking the IELTS, you still need to convince them that your English is good enough.
Yeah, it's like you're baking a cake. You might be using a different recipe, but you still need the right ingredients to make something amazing.
I like that. Exactly. With the right prep and guidance, you can definitely bake your way into your dream program, even without the IELTS. Now, before we wrap this up, I'm curious, are there any universities in Singapore that take a more, holistic approach to admissions? Like they look at more than just test scores?
Oh, yeah, I was thinking about that too. I bet there are some students out there who aren't great test takers, but they have other amazing qualities and experiences. What did we find? Are there any universities like that?
We did find some really interesting examples.
Oh, tell me more. So you were about to tell us about these universities that have a more holistic view of applicants. Which one stood out to you?
One that really impressed me was the Singapore University of Technology and Design, the
Hmm.
SUDD. They're known for being really innovative with their approach to education. They put a lot of emphasis on problem solving and design thinking.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. They do have minimum IELTS requirements for most programs, but here's the thing. They're also willing to consider students who have a really strong portfolio, or they can show evidence of some kind of exceptional talent, even if their IELTS score isn't, like, perfect.
So it's like you're saying, show us what you can do, not just what you scored on a test. That's awesome. What kind of student do you think would do really well at SUDD?
I think CDD would be perfect for someone who is really passionate, creative, and just driven to make a difference. They seem to really like students who think outside the box, aren't afraid to try new things.
Yeah, I can see that. What other universities stood out to you?
Another one was LaSalle College of the Arts. They're a leading institution for contemporary arts education in Asia, and they're known for being a bit more flexible when it comes to English language requirements, especially for their diploma and foundation programs.
So if you're an artist or a musician or a designer, LaSalle could be a great place to go, even if you're not super confident about your IELTS score.
Right. They seem to get that your artistic potential isn't always reflected in a standardized test. They care more about your portfolio, your passion, what makes you unique.
Okay, so SUTE for the innovators, LaSalle for the artists, any other universities that are taking this kind of holistic approach?
Yeah. The Nanyang Academy of Fine Arts, or NAFA, is another really well-respected arts institution in Singapore. And while they usually require IELTS for most programs, they've been known to be more flexible for certain students, like those who show exceptional artistic talent, or if they come from a background where English isn't as common.
I'm noticing a trend here. It seems like these arts institutions are realizing that language is only one part of evaluating someone's artistic potential.
You got it. They're looking for students who have a unique voice, a vision, regardless of where they come from or their language background.
It's great that these universities are recognizing that talent can come from anywhere, any others.
One more you might find interesting, SIM University. They're also known as UNISIM. They're really focused on lifelong learning, and they want to make education accessible to lots of different kinds of students. So while they do have English requirements, they're open to looking at things like work experience or other qualifications that show you can handle the academic work in English.
Oh, so they're acknowledging that you can learn outside of a classroom. I like that they're looking beyond those traditional metrics.
Right. They recognize that students come from all walks of life, and their experiences have shaped their learning in different ways.
This is so encouraging. It sounds like there are real options for students who want to study in Singapore but maybe feel stuck on the IELTS.
Definitely. The key is to just do your research, be persistent, and don't be afraid to explore different paths, those less traditional ones. And if you're feeling a bit lost, a service like LetzStudy can be a huge help. They really know their stuff when it comes to the Singaporean education system, and they can help you find the right fit.
It's great that there are resources like that out there to help students. This whole conversation has been really eye-opening. I think we've busted the myth that you absolutely have to have IELTS to study in Singapore.
I agree. We found so many different ways for students to achieve their dream of studying in Singapore, even if the IELTS seems like a big obstacle.
So what's the biggest thing you want listeners to remember from this?
I think the most important thing is that Singapore's education system is top-notch. They welcome students from all over the world. Don't let the IELTS stop you from following your dreams. Do your research, make a plan, maybe get some help from the experts, and you'll find a way to make it happen.
I love that. It's a message of hope for anyone who's ever felt overwhelmed by the IELTS or the idea of studying abroad. But, let's be real, even with all these other options, there might be some people thinking, okay, but what if my English really isn't good enough for Singapore? What advice would you give them?
That's a really good point. It's smart to think about that ahead of time.
Yeah.
The good news is there are lots of things you can do to improve your English before you even go to Singapore.
Oh, that's a relief. So what are some of those things? Where should someone even start?
Well, one option is to take an English language course, in your home country. There are a lot of good language schools that have programs specifically for people who are planning to study abroad. Those programs will help you with reading, writing, listening, speaking. They'll get you ready for university.
Like a pre-game warm-up.
Exactly. Another great option is to use all those online resources. There are so many websites and apps now that offer English language learning tools. A lot of them are free or pretty cheap. Interactive exercises, grammar lessons, vocabulary stuff, pronunciation. There's really something for everyone.
It's amazing how easy it is to learn English online now. You can do it from anywhere.
That's true. And if you want something a bit more personalized, you can try one of those online tutoring platforms. They connect you with a native English speaker for one-on-one lessons.
Oh, so you can practice your speaking and get feedback from a real person. That's great for building confidence.
It is. And here's another tip. Immerse yourself in English language media. Watch movies and TV shows in English, listen to music and podcasts, read books and articles. It makes a big difference.
It's like learning without even trying.
Right. And it's fun. It doesn't feel like work when you're enjoying what you're doing.
That's the best way to learn. Make it fun and part of your everyday life. What about students who are worried about their writing? Any advice for them?
That's definitely a common concern, and for good reason. Academic writing has its own rules. My advice would be to start practicing as soon as possible.
So don't wait until the last minute.
Right. The more you write, the better you'll get. And don't be afraid to ask for feedback on your writing. Ask teachers, professors, friends who are good writers.
Getting feedback is so important. It's like having an extra set of eyes to help you catch those little mistakes and make your writing clearer and more interesting.
You're right. Another tip is to read a lot of English. Pay attention to how different kinds of writing are structured and the style they use.
Learn from the best.
Exactly. And try different styles of writing. The more you explore, the more you'll find your own voice and what you're good at.
I love that advice. Don't be afraid to experiment and make mistakes.
Exactly. And remember, becoming good at English takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. Just focus on making progress and building your confidence.
It's like training for a marathon. You don't start by running 26 miles. It takes time, dedication, and consistent effort.
That's a great analogy.
Mhm.
And just like training for a marathon, improving your English can be tough sometimes, but it's worth it, and it'll open up so many possibilities.
I think that's a great point to end on. We've talked about getting ready for university in Singapore, but we've also talked about personal growth and taking on the challenge of learning a new language. It's all part of the adventure.
I agree. It's those times when you step outside your comfort zone and push yourself to learn and grow that make life interesting.
And the English skills you develop before going to Singapore could even help you in your career later on.
Oh, absolutely. Being good at English is so valuable no matter what you end up doing.
So it's an investment that will keep paying off. Well, I think we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We talked about different ways to study in Singapore, even without the IELTS. We got some tips on how to improve your English, and we learned about some amazing universities that are looking at the whole student, not just a test score.
It's been a great conversation. Hopefully our listeners are feeling more informed and ready to take on this challenge with or without the IELTS.
Me too. It's been great exploring this with you. But before we go, I have one more question. We've talked about all the practical stuff, but what about the culture in Singapore? What advice would you give to students who are about to experience a whole new culture?
Oh, that's a good one. Adapting to a new culture can be exciting and challenging. I think the most important thing is to be open-minded, be willing to learn, and just see it as an adventure.
So embrace the unknown and be open to new things.
Exactly. Singapore is this incredible mix of cultures. You've got Chinese influence, Indian influence, Malaysian, and so much more. It's such a vibrant place. You'll see different customs, traditions, ways of life.
It sounds amazing.
It really is. And here's a tip. Before you go, read up on Singapore's culture, history, and etiquette. Learn a few basic phrases in Mandarin, Malay, or Tamil. Those are some of the languages spoken there.
So show respect for their culture and try to connect with people.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone. Try new foods, Explore different neighborhoods, go to cultural events, and talk to the locals.
Really immerse yourself in the culture and make memories.
Absolutely. And remember, it's a two-way street. Share your own culture and experiences with the people you meet.
Build bridges and understanding.
Right. You might even make some lifelong friends.
That's the best part about traveling and studying abroad. You expand your horizons, connect with people from different backgrounds, and create a richer life experience.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
I think this is a natural place to wrap up our deep dive. We covered so much, from IELTS requirements to the cultural side of studying in Singapore.
It's been a really insightful conversation.
I agree. I hope our listeners are feeling inspired and ready for their own adventure in Singapore. But before we say goodbye, I want to leave everyone with one last thought.
Okay, I'm listening.
We talked about all the different ways to study in Singapore with or without the IELTS. But I think the most important thing to remember is that the journey is just as important as the destination.
That's a really good point.
The whole process of researching, planning, and getting ready to study abroad can change you just as much as being there. It's a time to learn about yourself, grow, and challenge yourself.
I like that. It's not just about the degree, it's about who you become along the way.
Exactly. So to everyone out there dreaming of studying in Singapore, embrace every step of the journey, from the research to submitting your application.
And remember, there's so many opportunities out there. Don't be scared to explore them.
That's perfect. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into studying in Singapore. We hope you learned something new and feel inspired. Until next time, keep learning, keep dreaming, and keep those applications coming. Okay, so we've talked about how some universities might not always need that IELTS score, and we've even found some awesome places that look beyond just those test scores. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, what if I'm listening to this and I'm like, yeah, Singapore, that's where I want to go. But the IELTS just feels, I don't know, like a huge mountain to climb. Are there universities that would look at my application, like my grades, my extracurriculars, maybe even a really good personal essay, instead of just focusing on the IELTS?
That is such a great question, and it's awesome that you're thinking about all those different ways to show off what you're good at. And the answer is yes, definitely. There are universities in Singapore that understand a test score is just one small part of who you are as a student.
That's so good to hear. So which ones are they? What are those hidden gems that look at the whole picture?
One that comes to mind is the Singapore University of Technology and Design, SUTD. We talked about them a little bit earlier, remember? They're all about innovation and that design thinking process. They do usually have those minimum IELTS requirements, for most of their programs, but they're really open to seeing what else you bring to the table. Like if you've got a super impressive portfolio, or you can show them you've got some other amazing talent, even if your IELTS score isn't quite where they'd normally want it to be.
So it's like they're saying, prove you can walk the walk, not just talk the talk. I love that. What kind of student do you think would really do well at a place like that?
Honestly, I think SUD would be a great fit for someone who's passionate and creative and really wants to make a difference in the world. Those students who think outside the box, they're not afraid to take risks, to try new things. That's what SUD teaches to be all about.
Yeah, totally. They sound like they're all about innovation and pushing boundaries. What other universities are like that, in terms of that holistic approach?
Another one that caught my eye was LaSalle College of the Arts. They're a huge name in Asia for contemporary arts education. And they're known for being a bit more flexible with their English language requirements, especially for those diploma and foundation programs.
Oh, cool. So for all those aspiring artists, musicians, designers out there, LaSalle could be a really good option, even if the IELTS isn't their thing. It's awesome that they recognize artistic potential isn't always about a test score.
You're so right. They care more about what you can actually create, your portfolio, what you're passionate about, what makes your perspective unique. And it's so refreshing to see that. It really opens doors for students from all kinds of backgrounds.
Okay, so we've got SUTI for the innovators, less for the artists. Any other universities doing things a little differently?
Yes. There's the Nanyang Academy of Fine Arts, or NAFA. They're another top arts institution in Singapore. And while they generally do require IELTS for most programs, they're willing to be a bit more flexible, especially for students who have amazing artistic talent or who come from places where English isn't as widely spoken.
I'm definitely seeing a pattern here. These art schools get it. Language is just one piece of the puzzle when you're evaluating someone's potential in the arts.
Right. They're looking for that unique voice, that vision, regardless of your background or your native language. They understand that creativity can go beyond words.
I love that. It's so important to recognize that. It gives hope to students who feel like a test score can't capture who they really are. Are there any other universities thinking this way?
Here's one that might be interesting: Sim University, also known as UNISIM. They're really focused on lifelong learning and making education accessible to everyone. They do have English requirements, of course,
Yeah.
but they're known to look at other things too. Like, do you have relevant work experience? Do you have other qualifications that prove you can handle the academic work in English? They look at the whole person.
So they're acknowledging that you can learn in different ways, not just in a traditional classroom setting. They're not just focused on those standard metrics.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that every student brings something different to the table.
Yeah.
They've had different experiences that have shaped their learning. They look at your potential, not just your test-taking ability.
This is so encouraging for students who dream of studying in Singapore but might feel like the IELTS is holding them back. It sounds like there's hope.
There absolutely is. The most important thing is to do your research, don't give up, and be willing to think outside the box. And if you're feeling lost, remember, services like LetzStudy are out there to help. They can guide you through the process and find what works best for you.
So for everyone listening who wants to study in Singapore but might be a little intimidated by the IELTS, don't give up on your dreams. There are options. With a little guidance and some planning, you can make it happen.
I couldn't agree more. Singapore has an amazing education system, such a rich culture, a thriving economy. It's an awesome place to study and live. Don't let a test score stand in your way.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive, everyone. We hope you found it helpful and inspiring. Remember, the more you know about your options, the better prepared you'll be to navigate this whole exciting world of studying abroad.
And if you want to learn more, check out the resources we've linked in the show notes. We've got more info on specific universities, those alternative English tests, and tips for making your application stand out.
Until next time, keep learning, keep dreaming big, and keep those applications coming.